Okay, welcome to From Rome Info Video. Let me adjust my lighting. Okay, that's better. So today I'm going to discuss the Charlie Kirk assassination and give you a forensic summary. And my name is Brother Alexis Spagnuolo, and From Rome Info is the only truly independent, uncontrolled English language news source for Catholics published out of Rome, Italy. And it's probably one of the, I don't even have to say published in Italy because it's probably one of the only in the world in English language. And what I mean by uncontrolled is I don't have anyone telling me what to say and what not to say. And I believe that you should use your critical thinking in every aspect. The only person that shouldn't be questioned is God in my book, but men should be questioned. And I think the case of Charlie Kirk, his death, is, as I said on Dr. Jane Ruby's show, which you can watch on Rumble, which she interviewed me last week, is a moment in the history of the United States that's going to become as significant as the assassination of John F. K. Not because Charlie Kirk was as important as John Fitzgerald Kennedy, but because his assassination was so public and in an age of social media that it became in your face to everyone who is an American citizen or resident, and to even individuals around the world. So it represents an important moment in which the common man, the nobody, like myself and you, we're nobodies here. I am not a priest, okay? I have no authority. No one listens to me. I'm a nobody like you. But I do have a college education, in which nobodies like us, for the first time, have an opportunity to get to know the facts of a very controversial event and hear on social media opinions of all kinds about it, such that you can say that the public is doing their own investigation side by side with the authorities. Now, this is something really unique to the culture of the United States. I know I have viewers throughout the English-speaking world, whether they're from Ireland, Great Britain, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, India, the Philippines, South America. It's not just the United States, or the majority is the United States. Not in all these countries, especially not here in Italy, are you allowed to publicly criticize, speculate, and even impugn the reputation of others so freely, because in the United States, we have very liberal laws on freedom of speech. And that's why, although I publish from Rome Info from Italy, my website is actually in the United States. And my YouTube channels are located in the United States, so that I have freedom of speech and no one can shut me down or threaten me, although they've tried that. But since this is what's going on right now in the United States in social media, just search Charlie Kirk shooting, Charlie Kirk shooter, Charlie Kirk assassination, Kirk shooter. You'll find all kinds of social media posts about this. This is not just on YouTube. It's also on Rumble. It's being discussed on TikTok. It's being discussed on Twitter, every platform out there, on Telegram channels, and all kinds of ways. And people from all levels of society being asked for their opinion. Everything from military veterans who know something about ballistics to former police officers and individuals who've been in the organization, and like Candace Owens is doing an investigation, or even a very prominent journalist like Tucker Carlson has opined on what he thinks about the investigation. So there's a lot of information out there. And I think I have a degree in cultural anthropology, so I think it's an absolutely excellent moment, a teaching and learning moment, where we can begin to use our abilities to think critically. It's absolutely necessary to think critically, although that's a modern phrase, but you need to be proven. Whether in ancient times, as a hunter, or in less ancient times as a farmer or a peasant in Europe, or in modern times, we and our ancestors, the ones who gave you life without which you wouldn't exist today, they were people who used their noggin. They thought. If they didn't look out for risks, dangers, you probably wouldn't exist. So we are all the children of the prudent and those who practice foresight and use their noggin. And we got to do the same today, because we're not in a society where the threats are only in the natural world, like, is a wolf going to take the sheep in my herd, or is a rabbit going to eat up my cabbage patch? Okay, we are in a world today where the dangers are much more greater because of the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of extremely few number of individuals, who basically are total sociopaths and psychotic people who believe they can do anything they want and they can get away with what they want. So the threats are much more real, they're much more grave, and yet the level of deceit and disinformation is all the more profound. So if we don't quickly learn to think critically about what we are told about the events of our time, we're going to be victimized in a very bad way. Hey, what happened just 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago? We were all victimized in such a way that you didn't even see me on YouTube after a while, because I was one of the first to speak about it. Yeah, the videos of me walking the empty streets of Rome during the lockdown went viral around the world, and I'm right up there on the list of absolute people to be censored. So I don't, you hardly hear me ever say those words again. You come to from.info, you'll see I write about them, because I use my noggin and say, look, if I want free speech, I better start my own news journal, and I did that. And with my own capacity to publish video, and I did that. But my site is like completely censored for the search engines. You almost never will find the search engines. So now with YouTube saying they're going to do a little less censorship, I'm going to do some videos to get the word out there. Because I come from a family where my father was a professor at Columbia. My mother was a elementary school teacher her whole life. Even my older brother taught for a while in the community college. And I've written a textbook on Latin. So I come from a family of educators, and a family that owns books, and a family that believes that it's important to provide everyone with information so that their curiosity can lead them to learn in the way they want to. And that's very important. So I want to do this show on a forensic summary of the Charlie Kirk assassination. And what I mean by that is I want to talk about what we know so far from all the credible sources out there, because I've made it a point in the last 5 weeks to watch everything I can about this. Partly because I've been a fan of whodunits my whole life, partly because it involves so many issues that intersect together, and partly because it seems absolutely bizarre that something like this should happen in the United States in the year 2025. So it catches everyone's attention, it catches my attention. And because it's a mystery, and it's a whodunit. I mean, are you going to believe the dominant narrative? So first, in a forensic study, you have to understand what I mean by forensics. I'm going to be it like a crime investigator. Now, am I a crime investigator? No, I'm not. But in my training in cultural anthropology, it's a forensic science that we look at evidence like an archaeologic digs. And we piece it together, and we try to explain human behavior and human societies on a basis of the evidence left. So it is a very forensic science. It's not the same as criminology, and I have not studied criminology. Okay. But what I mean by the summary is I want to give you the whole picture, because almost never, no one is doing the whole picture. You have a lot of YouTubers who are specialists in specific areas, and they're targeting after specific things. You have a lot of videos about theories of what happened. You have Candace Owens who's doing motivation, big groups behind it, but you don't have everyone putting it all together. I think you need a whole big view so that you don't lose track of everything. And because it's not just about one theory or another. And that's why I'm doing a forensic examining. So the first thing I'll tell you, I'll be very frank with you. The moment I heard of the Charlie Kirk assassination and watched the few videos that are out there, I was convinced that this was a professional job. That was just my first gut feeling. And sometimes your first gut feeling's wrong. And sometimes your first gut feeling is right. I come from a lineage where our first gut feeling is right. I had a grandfather who could look at a lemon tree in Sicily and tell you exactly how many kilograms of lemons are on it just by looking at the tree. So we're kind of good guessers in my family of that first gut, but that doesn't mean I'm infallible. But my first impressions were that this was a professional job in the sense of it wasn't done by one person. It was highly planned and highly coordinated and had a very specific purpose. And that was clear by the mere fact that Charlie Kirk was assassinated precisely at the moment he was speaking about transgendered terrorism, violence by transgendered persons, and gang violence. Precisely at that moment. So I knew immediately that the death of Charlie Kirk was politically motivated and was intended to send a political message. I knew also immediately that the person who did the shooting had extreme self-control. He didn't shoot anyone else. And how would anyone know that Charlie Kirk was going to talk about that topic in a place where you could shoot him at that precise moment and kill him with a single shot? Okay. Now, I have to admit, I am not a gun owner, and I have never shot a rifle. I've shot a BB gun. I had a cousin who liked shooting little birdies with a BB gun. I think I tried it once or twice. I didn't hit the birdie because I'm the kind of guy I wouldn't want to kill even a little birdie. Okay, so because I don't think killing things for fun is, it's not that I'm not a Buddhist, I'm a Catholic, but nevertheless, I think killing animals for fun is it's not me. Okay. So I can't say I'm an expert in those things. I do have some experience. We didn't mind when I was a child, we didn't have video games, but we had board games and I played tactical military simulations. And I nearly beat everyone, all my friends and brothers all the time. It's not like I played with many, but I enjoyed the challenge of the tactical exercises, strategic exercise. So I know some things very remotely about the real military, but I come from a military family. Both my fathers were in the First World War, one in the American Army, one in the Italian Army. And my father was in the U.S. Navy, and my brother was in the American Alabama National Guard and Massachusetts National Guard. And if you wonder why I'm dressed this way, it's because I'm a Franciscan brother. That's a kind of monk if you're not Catholic, now. And we're dedicated to peace and not bearing arms, okay? But not peace in a pacifist sense, peace in a Christian, Christ-oriented sense. Okay, so for the forensic summary, that was my first gut reaction because you had all these things at the same time. It wasn't shooting a girl drinking soda in the crowd. It wasn't a shot that rang out while Charlie was getting a drink or was throwing a hat. There weren't multiple shots. And who would want to kill Charlie Kirk? Okay, so I did my own investigation because I have to admit that I didn't know who Charlie Kirk was. And I've seen memes with Charlie Kirk, change my mind. But I didn't know that he started that whole thing or he even led a big thing because though I am a United States citizen, I have never voted for president in a U.S. presidential election. And I think I only voted in one election in my whole life because I never thought that the candidates were worth my vote. It didn't seem to be truthful, honest people with me. So I'm probably a lot more critical than any of Charlie Kirk's fans who are diehard voting Republicans, okay? Although I've always freely criticized, I had a father even on ham radio criticized Nixon during the Nixon administration and got visited by the FBI. So I don't come up from a family who's not critical. Okay. And I couldn't tell you who my anyone in my family voted for because we don't even discuss it. Okay. I don't even remember my parents voting in any election because, well, we're Italian Americans, but we're not political. Okay. So just from the first view of it, it seemed to be professionally organized and be a political assassination. And in forensic, the first appearance of a thing is called prima facie. And the first principle in forensic is what it appears to be at first sight is what it is. Okay. Which isn't always true because some murders are done in a way to conceal plots within plots. Now, we live in modern times. So when you examine the murder of anyone, it may not be what it appears to be because we live in an age in which there's a higher general education of the population and in which there's organized crime. And organized crime extends all the way into national governments and intelligence agencies, some of which are very nefarious. So there can be layers and layers of lies to cover what's really going on. The other forensic principle, which is ancient, is called qui prodest, and it comes from Roman times. And the principle is who does this murder benefit? Okay, because it's one thing if a drunk gets run over by farm equipment because he was so drunk he didn't know the tractor was coming down the road, and the guy driving the tractor was looking at his cell phone at the time. You don't assign a political motivation to that death, even though it might be ruled homicide because of the reckless carelessness of the guy driving the tractor. But when you have a political assassination that is coordinated with what's being said at the precise moment of a man who was so influential in a country as powerful as the United States, which is the preeminent superpower in the world, and who I didn't even have it. The little I knew about Charlie Kirk, I immediately knew one day this guy would be a presidential candidate if he had lived. And it's come out that that's the case. Even his wife has admitted that he had it in mind one day to run as president. So with my colleague over at Ordo Militaris Radio TV, AJ Bauman, we have for the last 4 years gone down all the rabbit holes of the deep state, of the Masonic Lodge, of the CIA, of Skull and Bones, and covered topics like the KGB, Mossad, and the creation and infiltration of the United States government by Masonic lodges in the U.S. and in Great Britain. And so I'm pretty prepared to listen to all the speculation out there. I'm not the kind of person like, I'm not going to listen to him because, that's anti-Semitic. I don't let my mind be governed by tropes like that. I don't believe them. What the modern state of Israel is doing is proof that Jews are killers because it's a Zionist government, and I attribute to the government the political ideology of the modern Israeli government, their views of things. I don't attribute that to Jewish people. But I am aware as a cultural anthropologist, a lot of people who identify as Jews feel that they have to be Zionists, and therefore the way that one political party in Israel, the ideology, could influence the world is a lot more than, for example, Italian Americans influenced by the government of Meloni. There's like zero influence. Giorgia Meloni says is not going to influence what the Italian in your neighborhood, the Italian thinks about anything, nothing whatsoever. Matter of fact, the Italians in the United States who are able to vote in the Italian national election is very small. And I'm dual citizen, so I could do it, but I never have. It's just like, what does it matter, So it's very different. So depending on your culture and ethnicity, how you relate to an event is very different. Now, Charlie Kirk was an American, and some basic facts about Charlie Kirk set the scenario for Charlie Kirk, because Charlie Kirk was not a college graduate. So how did he become so popular? His father was the chief architect on Trump Tower. And Trump has worked for the Skull and Bones Brown Brothers Harriman Bank in New York. His family, that's the bank that made his family wealthy and famous, because Harriman was a member of Skull and Bones, and he made he inherited his wealth from his father, who was the Rockefeller Rothschild agent in Pennsylvania Railway. So it goes back a long time. And his mother founded Planned Parenthood, the organization that becomes Planned Parenthood. And Brown Brothers Harriman is who made Bill Gates wealthy and famous. That's how he was able to take code from IBM and not sued for intellectual property theft and go on to Microsoft. So Charlie Kirk comes from the highest levels of power in the United States. He was not an ethnic American like someone like myself, who I take pride calling myself an Italian American. People ask me who I am, I'll say I'm Italian. I won't even say I'm Italian American, not because I'm not an American patriot or that I don't value my American citizenship, but because being Italian to me is what, if you want to know me eating, I'm going to be eating Italian food. What am I interested in? How the values, family values and stuff like that. Those will all come from Italian sources for me. So I take pride in identifying myself as an Italian. I'm not a white Anglo-Saxon that has lineage going back to the people who came off the people who founded Jamestown or Plymouth in the United States, on Mayflower. Okay, so I have a very different family history than many of the mainstream Americans that would be interested in Charlie Kirk. Okay. So, because I'm not Anglo-Saxon, okay, I'm pure Italian blood. I have some Greek, and I probably have some Spanish from my Sicilian side, but I'm Italian. And my ancestors came to the United States between 1860s and the 1920s, so it's not like they've been here a long time. And I have like very few relatives, and none of us ever became famous. I think the most my father helped design the antenna on Telstar, the first telecommunications satellite launched by Bell Labs back in the 60s, but that's pretty much it. Okay. But when I found out that Charlie Kirk was from that very high level white Anglo society, we can say, which is basically the ruling class in the United States. If you look at the presidents, who's been president since George Washington, if we exclude Barack Obama for a moment, you find pretty much everyone is related to that class. Trump is about the first one who's really, his family's only been a servant of that class because he's of German descent. He's not really of that class. And some have distant relations, and so you can trace many of the American presidents back to the same founding fathers or first immigrants, or even to the same families in England. Okay. There are, like George Bush. You can trace George Bush, I think, the Bush family back to someone who went in one of the Crusades in the Middle Ages. Okay, so that's because England and the British Isles is a very small place, and over the centuries, pretty much everyone became related to everyone else, and they're the ones who colonized the United States. The United States is a colony of the United Kingdom, or of the Kingdom of England, United Kingdom. It's not a colony of any other country, so it's only surprising. It's not surprising that our language is English, and that's our dominant culture. And so that we would have a ruling class that's of that ethnic background should not surprise. It shouldn't make anyone angry or suspicious, or I won't even get into the what the less arguments are. What they think they have to somehow destroy the white culture, things like that. That's absolutely absurd. You can see that I'm of Indo-European because I'm Sicilian. I have a slight color to me, and but I consider myself white. If you want to use that category, I think that category is a bit, European. I think that would be better to say. Okay. So once we understand that Charlie Kirk was from a very high level of society, then it becomes more understandable that he could be the target of a political assassination. Could he have been a future president? Possible. That raises the possibility. Was he very influential at the moment he was shot? Yes, he was very influential. That raises the possibility. Was he a controversial figure? Even higher raises the probability. And did he get in arguments with political groups or people of mentalities who are given to violence or have recently been given to violence. Yes. So if anyone on the morning of September 10th was going to do a risk analysis for the possibility that Charlie Kirk could be assassinated, and they hired an anthropologist like me, I would have said after just give me a dossier, and I would say he has a very high chance of being assassinated at any moment in 2025, and you should prepare for that. And that's why most organizations have major problems, because they never hire us cultural anthropologists who look at all these things and can see uh, the big picture. That's what we're trying to do, see the big picture. So in a way, once I understand who he was, because I didn't know who Charlie Kirk was before, it didn't surprise me that he was assassinated. And I also immediately had leads about who might want to assassinate him. So that's the context. We all know what happened. There was what sounded like a gunshot. His shirt moved. A red spot appeared on his throat, and moments later, lots of blood gushed out. He took a decorticate posture. He fell to the left under the table. And then within 18 seconds, his security team had him rushed to a car. And it was captured. There was a lot of people there with cell phones, but we have seen very little footage. So now this is the first problem. The first problem is why is anyone trying to control the publicly available information of what happened that day? And why is anyone telling anyone not to share it? That's not in the US Constitution, and it's not in the laws. And the truth cannot bias a trial in court. Any judge who thinks the truth can bias a trial is not the judge you want to hear a case on this. Okay. And I don't believe that, I have no knowledge of how honest the courts are in Utah, or even who the judge is in this case. But I get the impression he's not a judge appointed by Hillary Clinton, for example, or Barack Obama, because he's a state judge. He's not a federal judge. And because Utah is a Mormon state, and though I'm Catholic, not Mormon, I know something of the Mormon religion. So I tend to think that they have very high ethical standards. And they're not going to want the murderer of Charlie Kirk to get off on a technicality. That's not probably, I would imagine Utah laws are even all written that way. So that's somewhat of the context of what happened and why it already gives us some lines of investigation. Contextually, there's some problems about what happened. Okay, so I look at the big picture, because if a lone gunman nut decides to commit a crime, the only thing he can control is his own behavior. But if someone commits a crime that was improbable to succeed and yet did succeed, we have to look at other potential actors. And if we can find a larger group of individuals who seem to be acting, or events that seem to be atypical or anormal or anomalous, but which altogether enabled the crime to take place. Okay. And here I want to explain, the word conspiracy is often understood merely as individuals who know one another and conspire to commit a crime. But in modern times, with state intelligence agencies and whole levels of mediated control by which the globalists use NGOs and political action organizations and all kind of private wealthy people that fund this group and that group, we have to consider a conspiracy in a wider sense, whereas someone involved in enabling the crime to take place may not have ever intended to participate in a conspiracy or in a crime, but might have been manipulated uh, on the board like a pawn in a chess game. That he didn't know who put him there and then, but they know because he reacts a certain way that he would be the person to put there and then so that thus and thus could happen. And that's a level of conspiracy we should consider as being present because there's just too many anomalous things. The first of all is, as Candace Owens observed, there's too many new people. The principals in the FBI office was changed in Salt Lake City in July. There is this judge is newly appointed to that specific jurisdiction to hear cases that would involve murder. The coroner is newly appointed. The hospital to which Charlie Kirk was taken has a new CEO, a new head surgeon. That's too many new things. Unless you were to find, for example, that the alleged perpetrator of a crime decided only after he found out that all these people were new that it would be good to commit the crime because he'd have the opportunity, you would have to say that it implies a wider conspiracy. Not only a wider conspiracy, but someone who has influence at the highest or even above the levels of government, who arranged that all these things would take place and be coordinated, and yet from different agents. For example, we know that Charlie Kirk did not choose to go to UVU to give a talk. That was made by someone in his organization, and whoever made that decision needs to be identified. Who was involved in making that decision? Was it members of the organization only, or was it donors to the organization? And I think that once we know who made that decision, and they haven't revealed who made that decision, you'll be able to add another line of investigation. Okay. Then we have other events that took place that there's no way some kid with a furry boyfriend could have asked happen, like a plane out of Texas flying over Orem, Utah, and then returning to Texas, which is a make and model used to launch and recover military drones, flying low enough to launch them in the morning and coming back after the murder to pick them up. I think it was Mata, the online investigator Mata, he did a Facebook post where he says, one of his contacts says it's the Hades group working in the CIA, and that they're the ones who were also behind the attempted assassination of Donald Trump last summer. So I don't even have to know where the bullet came from, and I already have sufficient forensic evidence to rule out a lone shooter. Because there are so many improbable anomalies about this before I even know whether Charlie died or not, that, and drones were seen also, that there's no way that a Tyler Robinson could have gotten on the phone and asked all these things happen so it enabled him to do it. And there's no way for him to know all these things. I mean, how would he know that a plane from Texas was launching, that day, and was going to fly over Orem? I mean, it's not like he can call up a military contractor and ask for a plane like that. So we already know it's a conspiracy, and we know there's not a lone shooter. So the fact that people are still discussing whether there's a lone shooter or not is they've lost the big picture. Okay. Thank you, Unidentified, for praising me for my critical approach. Okay, so now let's go into the actual facts. How did Charlie Kirk die? Some people don't think he died. Okay, and I first want to address that. There are a lot of people criticizing conspiracy theories, wild questions, wild theories. I'm not criticizing them. You can have the wildest theory you want. You put it out on social media. Let everyone hear your theory. Because we want all lines of investigation, even crazy ones, talked about. because it helps us come back to reality. Okay. Someone has an idea that, I'll use this package of handy wipes. Someone has this idea that something happened or someone in this picture is responsible, this and that. If he doesn't air his idea and let other people see what's reasonable or unreasonable about it, we are lacking a point of view. Okay. And every point of view is good. Every point of view is good when we're studying a crime, because each of us can only see so much. Each of us are only going to notice certain things. But when we have numerous voices looking at an object from many points of view, then we get a three-dimensional analysis, okay? So it's good. I don't, have to remember the phrase conspiracy theory was coined by the CIA to discount criticism of their fake narratives. So as soon as you hear anyone blah, blahing conspiracy theories, the person either doesn't know what they're talking about or where that phrase came from, or they don't understand the importance of hearing everyone out and constantly going back to the facts of the case, the hard evidence, and comparing theories and explanations and lines of it with the actual reality. Because the more we do that, the more we get a grasp of what actually did happen. And that helps us understand it better. Because all of us, nearly all of us, are studying or paying attention to this event of Charlie Kirk's assassination through images on computer screens, which is so remote from reality that we have to realize that what we're seeing isn't always exactly what happened, and it could be modified. I don't get into the question of that. So there are individuals who think Charlie Kirk didn't die, and that it was all staged and done by holograms. I have been interested in science from my childhood. The first magazine I asked my parents, my mom gave for me once for my birthday was a science magazine. It would come every like 2 weeks with the latest news in science. And I don't know how many years I read that from like the age of 12 to 16. So I've always been interested in science, and I keep up on science news. And as much as I know, there is not yet a form of holographic technology to project someone who looked and did what we saw Charlie Kirk appear to be and do in all the videos of this event, and in front of all those witnesses. There's no technology can do that. Okay. You can do something that looks like it if you have like a black screen and a mirrors and things like that, but you can't do it in broad light at noon under a tent. Okay. So those who think he's a holographic, maybe in 100 years we'll have to consider things like that. But right now there's no that technology. And anyone who proposes that as a hypothesis needs to find the technology that exists. Did someone on YouTube do something about that? What's the latest holographic technology? And that's the first test on that theory, okay? There are those who believe that there was a blood squib and Charlie Kirk, his death was fake, either willingly or unwilling it. And there's experts that talk about that who've been in movies and theaters and stuff like that, whether it's true or not, how quickly he was taken away and stuff. If we are ever shown video and photo evidence of his autopsy, if that's ever made public, then we'll be able to say more definitively whether Charlie Kirk is dead or not. Okay. I tend to think you couldn't fool his wife, even at a funeral, if it wasn't him. But I've seen my own father and my own mother at a wake, and I can tell you they never looked like they were in life. Never. And so if some doubt rises in your mind that they are the person that your loved one, it's not so easy for the average person to figure that out, and that's just from the question of a blood squib. There are questions that are physiological, like how much blood. I'm not a doctor of medicine. I cannot answer that question. There are those who argue it's way too little blood. But of course, we don't see how much he bleeds under the table. We only see how much he bleeds before he falls or as he falls. Okay. The second of all is, as many have commented, the amount of blood that comes out of the body is proportional to whether the heart's beating or not. Even though heart's not beating, those bodies still bleed. So that's also a question. We also don't know anything about Charlie Kirk's health in the sense of what was his cardiac health, what was his blood health. Do you have high blood pressure, low blood pressure? Was his blood overly thick or overly thin? And we don't know precisely what his injury was. No one's told us that. We see him bleed from the throat, but we don't know if that's a slash or a pinprick. Okay. So if any, I once cut my finger on a can of tomatoes in the kitchen, and it went deep into the finger and it cut a tiny artery. And I saw blood spurt at least that far just from a finger. And it was just a tin can top that cut my thing. And if the guy next to me in the monastery wasn't a visitor who was a registered nurse, he immediately grabbed my hand, he immediately did everything that was necessary so that I don't even have a scar today. Thanks be to God. Otherwise, I would have been like utterly freaking out because I don't know anything about medical care. So many combat medics have said there's just too little blood on the people that helped him. Even a Paramount Tactical, who went to great lengths to obtain images showing some member of his team with blood on him, wasn't really convincing, not even to me. But as I said, we don't know what the wound was. We don't know how big that wound was. We don't even know if there was no exit wound on the back. Okay, so yes, Candace says she was shown a video of what the back camera showed, but she has no idea if that's the real video, if it wasn't doctored. She doesn't know that. Matter of fact, since someone took it and not the police, we have to assume that whatever we're ever told was on that camera could be a lie, because the chain of evidence has been broken. And all those cameras that were around him, when their SIM cards were taken out by someone at TPS-USA, the evidence is now a big question mark. It's a big question mark because there's no reason to take that out. You don't have to take the SIM card out of the camera. You could just take the camera down. I'm not an expert photographer, okay? But I have used cameras. I have done a video apostolate for several years. And the last thing I'm going to do is take the SIM card out of a camera. I'm going to take the camera because the SIM card isn't worth that much, but the camera could be worth thousands, okay? I never had a camera that much, but I can tell you that would be my first thought, is to take the camera down, not the SIM card, okay? So I find that really bizarre. Not only that, is that he's so obsessed with taking the SIM cards out that he disturbs the crime scene. Now, this guy might know nothing about forensic crime scene, but the guy who moves the chair to take the SIM card out, in my opinion, should go to jail. No matter what his intentions were, because as soon as he moves that chair, we don't know precisely where that chair was to do a ballistic study. He should go to jail no matter what, okay? Because that is absolutely reckless and irresponsible, okay? Absolutely reckless and irresponsible. And then taking the cards out, that's obstruction of justice. He should go to jail for that. If I was the judge in that case, I'd give him at least a year for each of those offenses, because there's something really strange. Or at least I'd have, if I was a prosecutor, I'd put him under pressure for several years in jail for obstructing, just to squeeze him to find out what's going on. Because I have the feeling if that guy was so squeezed, he might give me information that would help in the investigation. So the people who believe there was a squib, they try to explain it, and then where it was hidden and why it would get on Charlie's body. But as I say, we don't know what the wound is. We see a dot. And, that could have just been a nick. It might not have been the puncture of the carotid artery or vein, okay, jugular vein. Although many think that's the case because of the blood that came out. I'm not a medical expert, so I can't answer that. I just think that it seems more probable that it was a more profound wound. It seems more probable. But the lack of blood after the fact that there's no blood dripping as they go towards the van, and the fact that well, here's another thing. Why was there no ambulance there? And why did they take him to that hospital? So I said there's already sufficient evidence to show this conspiracy. We don't even have to talk about a second shooter. There is this guy called Baron Coleman, and he has a YouTube channel with only like 6,500 followers, less than my channels. And you never heard of me, right? So he's done these Google trend searches, and he has definitively shown that all the key players, the doctors at the hospital, even Tyler Robson's lawyers, even this Adam, this Adam guy who Life is Driving, who does the full 1 hour video before and after of what's happened. These names were Googled from either DC or Israel the week of like July 21st or into August. And there is no reason, even accounts that said something's going to happen tomorrow, even their name in Japanese was Googled a week or two before the event. So it is absolutely clear that the key players in this whole thing, even Tyler Robinson's name was Googled from DC beforehand. What we saw happen on September 10th in Orem, Utah, at the University UVU campus was orchestrated in advance by at least someone in Washington, D.C., and maybe someone in Israel. And if the data is showing up on Google Trends, we can already determine two things: that it wasn't the CIA or Mossad, okay? Because intelligence agencies can do those searches without using Google, unless they're really stupid people. Now, the CIA might have some really stupid people, but I don't think Mossad has really stupid people, because whatever you think of Jewish people, they are highly intelligent people, okay? Because their language, Hebrew, is such a crazy language. If you can think in Hebrew, you're very intelligent, okay? So that means it was probably Zionists who, as a private initiative, when they heard Bibi Netanyahu talks about how it's important to control the narrative and everything we have to do, they felt, out of their zealotry, that they should perhaps even do extreme things. And I think everyone would agree with me that that's a potential explanation. Just the other day here in Italy, we had an Italian journalist who was nearly blown up by a bomb in his car outside his house after receiving numerous threats from Zionists who say, you and the staff of your show who did this report in Gaza, you need to be genocided like Charlie Hebdo. That was the magazine in Paris that made fun of Muhammad, and then some Islamists came by and murdered everyone in the office. So there are individual persons who follow the political ideology of Zionism who we should consider as possible actors in a conspiracy, even a complex conspiracy, especially since many of them are billionaires and can hire, ex-CIA members, ex-FBI members, ex-Mossad members to organize something like this. And in that case, they might use Google to do a search, not really thinking so clearly about, the fact that someone might find that evidence. So I think Baron Coleman's investigations, you should listen to them all and hear them all. That's absolute proof that there was a conspiracy and was orchestrated, and that Tyler Robinson, whether he knew it or not, was part of that. Okay, because as I said, the people in a crime can conspire together, like a team of bank robbers who rob a bank, like in that famous film about the bank robbery in Boston. They knew one another, although they didn't all know the guy who was orchestrating the whole thing. But it could be that they don't know one another. Okay. And they don't even know they're part of a conspiracy. They're just told to do, one little thing. Like one YouTuber says, it could be that Tyler was just told to leave his gun in that woods, or that maybe Twigs left the gun in the woods, and he was only told to be in the area. So the levels, the higher the control level, the more mediated and distant are the decision making. Even the so-called armed queers militia out of Utah, that was sponsored by a man in China who's Jewish, and whether he's a Zionist or not, I don't know, but he might be a Zionist, even though he might be a leftist, because Zionists aren't always supporting only the right or the left. They're all over the place because they want to make sure that their influence is in both sides of the political spectrum. So that's another data point that shows that this is obviously a conspiracy. And don't get fixated on whether it's one or two shooters or whether he was shot by Tyler Robinson or a drone or two people firing, because that, whatever that is, that doesn't change the fact there's already sufficient evidence to show this is conspiracy. Okay. So, but the decisions made by the security team are concerning to me. Okay, so I am president of a U.S. security company, Orem Militaris in Montana, and we are a humanitarian organization that tries to help the Christian victims of Islamic terrorism. That was our original purpose. And we've done a lot of research on that. It's not like we have employees. We've done fundraisers and humanitarian efforts. I have been to Ukraine to help the victims of the war. So you don't like Ukraine. You may not like the fact that I've been to Ukraine helping Christians. And I even have a friend on the front lines in the Ukraine, American, a friend, a Marine. So, you can guess what my views about that is, but only because it's a Christian nation. I think Christian nation should be defended. So I wouldn't say I have any expertise to make any comment about security teams, but I've thought about this topic for 9 years as president of a security company. And I would not even do the things they did. As I said, in the beginning of the show, even with the little I know about Charlie Kirk, I know already that the possibility that he could be assassinated was very high that morning. Okay, very high. I won't even add the fact that the students of the university didn't even want him to come. Okay, so it was a hostile environment. It was a university that had concealed carry. They allow students to carry guns on them. So, I mean, you're right off the charts. Any security team that felt that that event could go forward without spotters on the roof is totally incompetent and reckless. Okay. And if I had hired that team to provide security for Charlie Kirk, I would have a lawyer now suing them for incompetence and recklessness. And I can guess that if Charlie Kirk had an insurance policy on his life that is going to pay out because he was assassinated, that insurance company is going to sue that security company for reckless behavior, because it's so obvious that it's reckless. Okay. There are members of that team who aren't even looking at the crowd. There's no one on the roof. They allowed the university to basically strip away from Charlie all levels of protection. They wanted drones, the university wouldn't allow it. They wanted a man on the roof, the university wouldn't allow it. If the university doesn't allow it, you can still do it. You subcontract someone else to do it. And he's in a nondescript student-looking kind of dress, and he does the things that you wanted to do that the university wouldn't let him. And you never tell anyone it happened or took place. Okay, but you have an earwig, and that person says, "Yeah, there's someone on the roof," and immediately you say to the police, "We've been informed there's someone on the low-C roof," and that would never happen. Charlie would be alive today. So the security team, even if they didn't want to hire someone in secret as a subcontractor to do everything that university wouldn't let them do, what they should have said to Charlie was, "We are not going to allow this event to go on because our basic minimum security standards for your personal protection cannot be met. And they should have been an absolute no. They should have gone on strike and said, Charlie, you're not leaving your hotel this morning. They didn't do that. And that is irresponsible. And this shows why it is always better to subcontract out security, not to own it as a subsidiary of your own company. Because if you're subcontracting it out, the other company's worried about their liabilities and they're going to do what I said should be done. Okay. I know that much. Okay. So I have not been in the military. I've never handled a gun. I don't know anything about security changing, but I know that much. And anyone who says otherwise, you know, I don't think he's taking a big picture. I'll say only that to be as polite as possible. So the fact that there's no ambulance behind there, that's not only the university's fault, because the university should require that an ambulance and maybe someone like firemen be present when there's that many people, and make the event person paying for the event or organizing the event pay for that. That's what they do here in Rome. I've organized a big event here in Rome, and I had to pay to have an ambulance and firemen at this event all day long, doing nothing. And it cost me, I don't know, it cost me like €2,500, and I had to pay for security, and that cost me 10,000 euro. And I had to hire 30 security. And I spent a lot of time talking to security, what they would do, what they wouldn't do, what could they do and not to do. And I had them check everyone coming into the event, looking at all their IDs and everything. And these guys were all ex-carabinieri, ex-military police. So they made sure that only honest people entered that event. And this was not an event for someone who could be politically assassinated, okay? So maybe I'm more sensitive to that because I'm a president of a security company than guys on YouTube who've been in the military and shoot guns, because they haven't been owners of security companies. But I think the guy who runs Paramount Tactical should at least have discussed that. And the fact he didn't made me think that, he's joshing you guys a bit when he wants to absolve the security team of everything and praise them for what they've done. Because if you fail on the big check boxes of the basic security environment you're going to have, it doesn't matter whether you get Charlie into a van in 18 seconds or not, because he's already been shot, and security is supposed to prevent him from being shot. That's their first duty. It's not saving his life once he's been shot. Okay. And if he received the injuries that are claimed that he received, there was no chance he would have survived that anyhow. Okay. At the hospital. But the fact that they took him to Timpanogos Hospital, the hospital that was Googled from Israel 7 weeks before, is absolutely bizarre. Because if they were so negligent in all this other areas of security, why didn't they take him to the nearest hospital? Because a negligent person would say, what's the nearest hospital? We're going to go there. But they didn't. They went to the hospital with the Google searched the surgeons, the name of the hospital. So I think that you cannot exclude a line of investigation that someone in his security organization was part of the conspiracy, willingly or unwillingly. Someone suggested to them, someone in the conspiracy fed them the name of that hospital and told them to take Charlie there. And the person who made that decision should be put in jail until he talks. And any charges they bring against him, they should threaten him until he talks, because that is a key player. Just like whoever made the decision that Charlie would speak at that university, those are key players. The person in the university made the decision that there be no security, like drones and people on the roof. That's another key person to investigate. Who are these people? What are their names? Because it could not have happened without them. Okay. I take a less view of the hand signals, although there is a lot of strange behavior from the people around him. A lot of unnecessary stuff which may or may not be coordinated, because after the event, after the assassination, when we're looking at this film, we know the precise moment that everything's going to happen. And we can look at what happened before and we can extrapolate, is this a sign of foreknowledge? When it only could just be circumstantial coincidences of aberrant behavior of a group of guys that, you know, um, don't know what they're doing or are not really good at what they do. Now, I know some military guys and I know some guys who are into athletics, and I can tell you they're always moving when they don't have to move. It's not like us monks were trained to stand still for hours on end, on our knees in church, and you won't even see us twitch our head for 45 minutes because we're trained not to move. We're trained not to see. We're trained, to remain still because we're doing our meditation. But military guys and athletic guys, they're always twitching. I remember when we had a potential vocation monastery years ago, and this guy was an athlete. And I mean, he couldn't sit in philosophy class without going like this to his fingers and, like this to his arms, and stuff. So I'm not suspicious by that behavior, although the guy who goes like this with his arm and then moves his fingers, that's very suspicious. Okay, so now let's get to how Charlie died. What caused that wound? The shirt moving is bizarre, and I don't yet think there is a satisfactory explanation. Now, I have watched something that I've never seen before. Once I knew about this case and the murder of Charlie Kirk, I watched the guys on YouTube that do high-speed photography of bullet impacting things, whether they're pieces of metal or simulated human targets or flesh targets. And they take film at million frames a second, 5 million, 10 million, even 20 million. And it's amazing what actually happens that our eyes don't see. Because when a bullet enters an object, the object changes shape. And a high-speed bullet changes the shape of an object in fractions, in millionths of a second. Its shape is changing violently. And we can't see it with our human eyes because our human eyes have organic sensors and they don't refresh that fast. I'd like to see someone find out how many frames a second our eyes can see. But television, movies and stuff is like 30 frames and it seems real to you. So our frame rate of our natural eyes is not good. But when you look at high-speed photography at 20 million frames a second, you go into YouTube, you can see that a lot is happening that we don't see. So it is possible that a high-speed bullet entering a human body causes massive cavitation. That means creating a cavity so that the torso expands out briefly for 2-3 millionths of a second. It goes, and that could explain the movement of the shirt. However, how is it that we see the movement of the shirt and not the cavitation, other than he maybe expands a bit? And we see some extreme movement of the shirt, and we don't see extreme cavitation, except in the back. It appears that something is bulging out his back, which could be his entire spinal column being dislocated by a bullet. Could be. So how can we see one and not the other? That shirt wasn't that loose. Now, if his shirt was silk, silk really catches the air. I don't know if you've ever seen silk. I've seen silk because it's used in church vestments of priests. So I've handled it. And I know that a high quality silk can flutter in the air in a way that normal cloth cannot flutter. So we have to know what is the fabric Charlie Kirk is wearing. And someone needs to do a wind test on that. Someone needs to put it on a human body and see how much it's able to be moved, like with a fan, turn on an electric fan, see if it moves. Because until we know that, we can't really draw any conclusion about why is that shirt moving the way it is? Why is it moving so much? And we need someone who's an expert in the cavitation of a human torso to see if it's possible that you could have extreme cavitation in a torso and that it will return to its normal shape without blowing out. Because the claim that there is a bullet at the back of his shoulder blades and that there's no exit wound um, is seen by nearly everyone to be incredible, nearly everyone. And I think that's highly reasonable that it's because there's something strange about how Charlie Kirk died if he was shot by a bullet. Because the bullet penetrated far less than a 30 round six, which should have blown his head off. And yet, in the small distance it traveled, it created a lot more cavitation than a 30 six causes. Because for a 30 six to create that much cavitation, it has to go through like 12, 18, 24 inches of flesh. And there's only 6 inches in the neck. So how is it that this bullet pierces less than a 30 six and yet creates more cavitation than a 30 six? And you rifle experts out there, you need to answer that question. Okay. So Range Day, bro, Paramount Tactical, all you guys out there, whoever you are, I can't remember all your names. You need to find that out for us because that's a key question here. Is it possible that something fired from any kind of rifle can do that? Now, according to Candace Owens, who it's reasonable to suspect she does have lots of contacts in TPUSA because she was like Charlie Kirk's right-hand woman for many years. She says that the autopsy will show that there is a fragment of a bullet, but it will not be able to conclusively determine that it came from a 30 six, and that there is no exit wound. That's what she was told, but just because she was told doesn't mean it's true. The autopsy for JFK, the official autopsy of JFK, was a complete lie, and the doctors who did the real autopsy were threatened with death their whole lives and only admitted at the end of their lives because the threats were so bad. So from the moment we see them destroy the crime scene by whoever authorized the area to be paved over, and that's the other person, whoever authorized that person should also be arrested. Okay. And whoever at the university authorized it, they also should be arrested. The construction company did it. They need to be interrogated by the police because anyone with a little brain, okay, would understand that you don't disturb a crime scene. And if you do, you're going to be legally liable. Okay. But if I was a judge in this case, and the next hearing is on at the end of this month, I think October 30th, I would immediately rule that the death penalty charge be removed from this case. Because by authorizing the destruction of the crime scene, we no longer have a way to verify whether the autopsy is fraudulent or not. Whether that was an entrance wound or an exit wound, we have no way because the crime scene is destroyed. Unless the FBI came in those few days and found fragments, and they haven't admitted that it's really an exit wound. Okay. And that would be my first question of the prosecution. Are you going to present evidence showing that you found bullet fragments outside of Charlie Kirk's body? And if they say, no, Your Honor, I would then say, who authorized the destruction of the crime scene? And if he says the FBI authorized it or the local police authorized it, the state authorized it, if he says anyone authorized that, my immediate ruling is, if you don't remove the death penalty charge in this case, I'm going to order a mistrial because the evidence has already been irreparably destroyed. We cannot accept that. We can't verify the autopsy because the defendant has the right to verify the autopsy by external information, the examination of the crime scene. So there are those who think Tyler Robinson's going to be framed because even his lawyers were the name of his lawyers were Googled from Israel beforehand, and that might be the case. But this court case should not go after October 30th. This court case should be shut down. That judge is even using YouTube. This court case should end on October 30th. It should be thrown out. It would say to the prosecutor, you remove the death charge, or I'm going to throw this case out right now. I'm going to rule mistrial because the crime scene was destroyed. And we cannot send a person to death if the crime scene was destroyed. I mean, that should be as obvious as anything. I don't care how guilty you think the guy is. He might have even done it. But a case must forensically prove without reasonable doubt that he's guilty of aggravated murder. And if the crime scene was destroyed, that cannot ever be proven. Cannot ever be proven. Okay, so I haven't been responding to your comments, but I'll pause for a moment and just take a look at them here. Thank you, Terry, for stopping by. I don't know what a VFX, a blood squib is. Okay, maximum lithium media. Okay, you maybe could explain it in a link or in a comment. Okay, so Frank Turek claiming that there was a pulse. I think it's possible that if you electrically charge the cardiac tissue, that it can begin to beat, even if the connection to the human brain is broken. So that they got a pulse isn't determinative of anything, because they could have used electric charges on his chest, which could get the heart momentarily beating. Okay. Hello, Maria Grazia. Yeah. So the surgeon said, no, the surgeon saying that there's no exit wound, I wouldn't say is an absolute lie, Maximum Militia, because a lower caliber bullet, or as I think it was explained on Paramount Tactical, if a 30-06 cartridge engraved, if the engraving went too deep in the metal, then during the firing of the projectile, there could have been a failure in the cartridge, reducing the speed of the projectile. However, many who have analyzed the sound of the bullet say it's a crack bang from a supersonic bullet. Of course, it may not be from the gun Charlie Kirk that was fired from the roof. Okay, so I'll get to that point in a minute. But if it was, and even the cavitation isn't produced by a supersonic bullet, a bullet traveling faster than the speed of sound. How was it so big? Okay. Unless it was a special high-tech bullet that explodes within, but that would cause burning of the inner flesh, not just cavitation. Okay, and this is why it's so important that we actually see the real autopsy. And the fact that they destroyed the crime scene signifies to me that there's a decision high up that we will never see this autopsy, and that there'll be no secondhand confirmation. Because if I was on the defense team, I would want an exhumation of the body, and I would want a second autopsy. And the fact that his body was embalmed and not kept in cold storage during the length of this trial, at least for a month, so the defense team could do their own autopsy, is another reason to throw this case right out of court. Right out of court. Okay. So now regarding how he was wounded, and I have sustained from the beginning, because I'm a critical thinker, I'm not going to believe that the sound I hear, the projectile that was found, and the thing that launched it were all tied together. Because in modern times, all these things could have independent causes. You can have someone fire a supersonic bullet into the air, and you're going to hear the crack bang. And since the FBI was, if you're in a conspiracy, the FBI is not going to search for that bullet. That bullet could be anywhere. You fire a rifle like that, that bullet could be a mile away and no one would ever find it. Okay? Because the person on the roof might have shot not at Charlie Kirk, but in the direction of Charlie Kirk towards the highway, which is behind there. And it could have gone into the lake and you'll never find it. And no one would have ever seen that. Okay? So the sound could be caused from the guy on the roof. But that doesn't mean a bullet was fired at Charlie Kirk from the gun that made that sound, okay? The thing inside Charlie Kirk may not be a bullet from a gun. It could be from a drone or an air rifle from another direction. If we don't see that autopsy, we don't know that there's no other entry wound. We don't know if this was an exit wound or not. We don't know. And therefore, everything said about the autopsy, you can't act or can't think on the basis of that is true. Matter of fact, you have to presume it's false, because they embalmed the body, buried Charlie, and they destroyed the crime scene. And without the body and the crime scene, there's no way for us to determine if the autopsy is a lie or not. And there's also no second autopsy. So this is like in JFK. It's the autopsy that can convince most people to accept the lie about the JFK assassination for all the years until it came out at the death of one of these doctors that he said he was threatened with death and that autopsy was complete fraud. Okay. And if Charlie Kirk was to be president someday, considering his personality, his influence and stuff, considering the fact that Trump is very popular, and it's likely that after his 4 years is up, another Republican might win, who would be better to put forward than a Charlie Kirk. The fact that Charlie Kirk was disengaging from some of the main narratives of the GOP supporters, of the people who fund the GOP, would make Charlie Kirk an existential threat for their control of the United States, whether that's Skull and Bones or the Zionists or whoever, or the ruling class, because whatever you think of us Catholics, Charlie Kirk was on a path which probably would have led to him becoming a Roman Catholic. And the Catholic religion is really considered detestable to the ruling class that founded the United States, to the Mossad and to Skull and Bones. So that made my persona extremely non grata, to use a little Latin phrase there. So I think Candace's investigation of motivation is highly likely to pinpoint the persons whose words and actions reflect and confirm that it's highly American Zionists with contacts in DC and Israel, and that they did it because they wanted a Turning Point USA to push a Zionist agenda and keep the next generation Republican voters voting for presidents who will send money to Israel, because Israel doesn't exist without money from the United States. And since Zionists in Israel have even blown up ships carrying Jews, I don't think they'd have any qualms about assassinating Charlie Kirk. Not in the least. They wouldn't even think of it. They would joke about, we need public execution. So people think Candace Owens is anti-Semitic in the things she's reporting or her motives. I don't think it's anti-Semitic at all. Anti-Zionist, you might say, yes. Let's call it what it is, anti-Zionist. But it's not a sin to be anti-Zionist. We don't have to be Zionists. Those of us who aren't Jews and members of Zionist parties, okay? We're allowed to have freedom of political, thought, in the United States Constitution. At least that's what it should mean. So where he was hit from, there are those who say it was hit from something in the trees. Was it a drone or maybe something on the other side of the courtyard near that little shrub on the balcony and stuff, whether it was a shooter or a drone? There are pictures that people say are drones, and that seems to be widely accepted now that there are drones. I think multiple voices of individuals who have no personal associations have confirmed that the government now has accepted that there were drones there today. So I don't. There are people who say drones couldn't do that, but I follow the news pretty closely coming out of the Ukraine. You'd be amazed the latest technology in drones and what they can do. There are drones that can shoot bullets, subsonic and supersonic. There are drones that can shoot projectiles that pierce the body and explode. That's all possible. Okay. And that's why I say, why does this thing have less of a penetration than 30-06 and yet more cavitation than a 30-06 would produce in that thing? That speaks to me of high tech. That's not normal ballistics. And that's why all the ballistic guys, all the military guys whose experiences in past technologies, not current technology, find it inexplicable. And that points to the fact that there's something else there that no one's yet discussed. Okay. And so, is it possible that Tyler Robinson was the guy on the roof on that point that fired a gun? Yeah, I think that's possible. It's even probable. Although I haven't seen any definitive evidence to say that the guy on the roof was Tyler Robinson. I think that is pure conjecture. I haven't seen any evidence. They claim they found his handprint on the roof. Okay, DNA, I would like to see if that's a perfect match or not, because, Utah is a Mormon state. The Mormons have big families, but they're a group that marries within their group. So it's highly possible that, dozens or hundreds of people in Utah have close DNA matches to Tyler Robinson. It's highly possible. It is so highly possible. It's like unbelievable, you know. So as a cultural anthropologist, if DNA was brought in and I was on the defense team, I would hire an expert to say, what is the possibility? I would even send people out around Utah taking DNA tests from other Mormons. I'd even look at the lineage of Tyler Robinson on both sides, and I would look for someone who that prosecutor's DNA test would also match. And then I'd bring it in the court and I'd say, Your Honor, here's an expert in DNA, and he's done a survey of 250 people in Utah, and he found 24 of them who also matched the DNA brought by the prosecution against my client. And at that point, that whole thing would be thrown out because I'm not saying that there's that level of premeditation and planning in this conspiracy, but at this point we have to consider everything because there's so many of these high-level global facts and anomalies that show us that this is conspiracy that we have to at this point consider any kind of micromanagement of the identity of whoever this is as important. As one channel pointed out, what's his name? I forget what it's called. I think it's called Hustle. He pointed out that the workers in the house under construction across the street from the university who actually spoke with the suspect as he was walking through, as he was asking permission to walk through the construction site, described someone wearing a black mask, black trench coat, and black cargo pants. And we know that the guy seen running on the roof isn't wearing those. I have always been suspicious about the video on the roof because when it was first shown to the public in a live event by the Utah officials, I watched that live, and the timestamp was not in that part of the video. The timestamp was in that part of the video, and it began at 12:22:30. And when they said that he was shot at 12:23, I was saying, what? How can the guy start running 30 seconds before the shot was taken? And I wasn't able to see that video enough before the questions came into mind. Now that video's disappeared. Someone has to find that video with the timestamp down here to see if the video begins with someone lying down in that corner way up there. Okay. And I don't know if you're seeing me in reflected or not, so I don't know if you're getting me pointing to the right side of the screen. Because I'm not entirely certain. I would want to see proof in court that that video is of someone running on that roof on that day, and that what we're seeing is not someone running on that roof on another day. Okay. Because how is it the men in the house under construction see someone dressed entirely different? Did, in addition to caching the rifle, the guy did a complete changeover? He would have had to have, maybe that's what he has in his backpack. Okay, maybe not. Long, greasy hair. The guy we see at the Dairy Queen and the guy we see on the roof and walking up the stair does not have long, greasy hair. So who was that? And have they identified the correct person? Okay. Because if you want to look like someone else, you get a patsy to walk up the stairs dressed like how you're going to walk up the stairs. Okay. And as far as I know, you can enter that walkway and get to the roof of the Losi building, either from the parking lot or from the stairwell that gives you access to the amphitheater. And if they have pictures of him on one stairway and not the other, you can't exclude the fact that another person got up there from the other stairway. Okay. Looking entirely different. And as one CIA retired agent said on one of the YouTube channels, if you're trained in this, you can change how you look in a matter of like 20 seconds, because you're wearing special kind of clothing where you take it off, you invert it, and you put it back on, and it looks something totally different. So I'm not convinced that it's Tyler Robinson on that roof and not Lance Twiggs. The video by Life is Driving shows 5 individuals dressed in the same colors as the picture of what is claimed to be Tyler Robinson at the Dairy Queen. 5 guys, including his son who's following him around. Black cap, maroon t-shirt, dark pants, and a backpack. So how is that there are 5 guys in that 1-hour video wearing the same color as Tyler Robinson? That to me shows there's a conspiracy. And that as soon as I saw that, I knew that Life is Driving is potentially, at least his son, lured him there as part of this conspiracy, or someone told him to do this that was part of the conspiracy, or they were told by someone who's part of the conspiracy, and that he unwittingly. But I think the argument given by Baron Coleman that Life is Driving is just showing ruse on a live stream and that he was doing surveillance is more than highly probable and totally credible. If I was in a jury, I'd say that's absolutely certain. And if I was a prosecutor, I would have Life is Driving in for questioning. And if they're not doing that, then I would begin to doubt that the local authorities really want to solve this case. I could see how the FBI, I could see how if the conspiracy was out of some foreign nation or out of Washington or some billionaire Zionist, okay, or some deep state actor, but it's the local prosecutor who has the authority to bring in witnesses. And if he doesn't find that suspicious, then I think he's just trying to railroad Tyler Robinson and protect everyone else. I think that's pretty darn obvious. So as far as the bullet going through the front and stopping at the shoulder blades, the alleged, what Candace Owens and many allege is in the autopsy, that's just totally incredible, no matter what kind of bullet it is, because it would only hit the T1. It wouldn't bounce up the neck, hit the C2, 3, 4, 5. So if the autopsy is actually going to say that the bullet first hit the C2, then they're not even good liars, because this is just totally impossible. And if they say they only found a fragment of the bullet, but don't tell us who all the other fragments are, and didn't extract them, weigh them, and put them all back together, because they didn't want to, totally take apart Charlie's body for sake of his wife, then that is even less credible, that autopsy. I mean, if I was a judge, I'd throw the whole autopsy out and I'd say, well, if you want to proceed with these charges, I'd say to the prosecution, I'm going to exclude the autopsy because it was done in such a way as to prove that the bullet came from this alleged rifle. And it could have proven that if they did these things, but they willfully didn't do these things. So I'm not going to regard this as an autopsy, because I can't admit some evidence and not evidence that could be used to corroborate or disprove the claims of the evidence that it does contain. And I'd throw that right out there. And how are you going to get a conviction now if you have to throw out the murder charge because the crime scene was damaged, and you throw out the autopsy because it wasn't completely done? And how could you prove then that Tyler Robinson fired a bullet that actually killed Charlie? You couldn't. That's why I was told, I heard on I think Esselin's channel. He's a YouTuber. I think he's Jewish, and he had a woman on. He went to campus there, and she was saying that her contacts are affirming to her that this case won't even go to trial for several years. There's so much evidence. And that just smacks as an absolute cover-up, because it's perfectly within the realm of a judge on October 30th to look at the simple facts that I've discussed in this video and say, you're going to remove the murder charge, or I'm going to call a mistrial. Because I don't think, with the destruction of the evidence that has been done, this guy could ever get a fair trial on an aggravated murder charge. And I'm not going to hear a capital punishment case when the evidence has been so clearly manipulated from the beginning. And if he doesn't say that, he's corrupt. Okay. And his lawyers should immediately appeal for a mistrial to a higher court to have this case thrown out. Okay. And if they don't do that, Tyler Robinson is a patsy and he's going to be framed. I'm not saying he didn't do it. I'm saying he would get a sentence beyond what the law says he should get with a manipulated case. Now, it is true that someone might be guilty, but the case is manipulated to make him look more guilty, to get a conviction, and therefore he suffers death penalty in a sense justly, but in a juridical sense unjustly. That's certainly possible because human courts are not infallible. But I don't think anyone who wants a free, open, and transparent democracy would tolerate that. I don't think you should tolerate that, whether you think he's guilty or not. And I think we should approach this case with whether Tyler Robinson is guilty or not. Justice should be done according to the letter of the law, and he should get all the benefits of this its civil rights that he deserves of his civil rights. Okay, so the what if the autopsy contains what we are told it contains? It's absurd on the face of it. There's other theories that the chain he was wearing pierced his neck as he was being shot from the back. You know, to kill someone, all you need to hit him is with a high-speed beanbag that gives him whiplash and cracks his neck. That would be enough to kill him. Okay, you don't need to pierce the body. Of course, in the video, we don't see a high-speed beanbag hitting his neck, but you could do it with anything that could project a force. You could do it even with air, but there's no evidence that there was any kind of weapon like that. You could maybe even do it sonically, kill someone, but there's no evidence of that. Okay, you could do it with electromagnetic radiation, a beam pointed at the neck, frying the spinal column, but we have no evidence of that. You know, so there's a lot of ways Charlie could have died, and those who hold that wound was caused by the bullet somehow hitting his chain but not piercing him, and then whether it hit on this side or that side, or whether it was cavitation moving the chain and the cross came up and pierced his neck, you know, it seems highly credible to me, but it needs to be studied. Valhalla did a study of that, and he tries to explain why he doesn't think that according to laws of physics that would have happened. I have actually held many different crosses that you can wear around your neck, though I don't wear a cross around my neck. And I can tell you some of them are sharp enough to cut you. And if you have one of those things moving anywhere near partial supersonic thing, it could very easily make a small cut in your neck, which would be sufficient to cause the carotid or the jugular vein to issue a whole amount of blood. But that's not going to damage the vertebrae in your neck. Okay. And the whole idea of bullets ricocheting off the skull, not supersonic ones. And if they weren't supersonic, what produced the expansion of the torso that we apparently see? Okay. What would have moved that chain if it wasn't cavitation of the upper torso? So there's a lot of problems with that theory. Of course, if we never get to see the autopsy, if there's never a second autopsy, we don't know what happened to him, and we'll never know what happened to him unless we get that camera footage. And that is why taking that camera footage, when that guy of TPS USA took those SIM cards out of those cameras, if I was a judge, I'd throw the case out on that alone, a murder charge. So you're not going to produce a murder charge when the evidence of the cameras closest to him was removed by someone working next to him without police authorization, because it's electronic evidence. Anyone could take that SIM card, put it into another device, and immediately with the proper software, manipulate that information, change it, destroy it, in a way we would never tell and no court could tell, because that's something intel agencies could do. And it's pretty obvious that there's so much coordination of anomalous events around this that we have to presume that the people who wanted Charlie Kirk dead have access to that technology. So that's a third reason to throw this case out. And the fact that that guy's allowed freedom and he isn't being questioned and held and not charged for this kind of thing is another sign to me that whoever's coordinated this assassination of Kirk has a lot of power, even at the local level in Utah. Now, Mormons are often recruited into the CIA and the FBI, so they have strong ties. And there could be Mormons who were politically opposed to Charlie Kirk. Multiple reports say that more and more Mormons are supporting left-wing ideas. And that's because in traditional Mormon families, there is such a strict morality that once they go out on their own, some of them just go way to the other side, you know. Um, because in the Mormon religion, Jesus Christ and Satan are brothers. They're both sons of God the Father in the Mormon religion. And because they believe that, there's a lot more possibilities of variation from Christian morals that could be possibly seen in someone who grew up Mormon and yet broke with the religion than we would see in other Christian groups where we don't believe that. We don't believe there's any ideology. God the Father created Lucifer and he fell, but he was never a friend of Jesus Christ. Matter of fact, in the Catholic religion, we believe it's at the moment God revealed to Lucifer that his son would become incarnate is when he rebels, that he never, ever, ever was a friend of Jesus Christ. He was never in favor of the incarnation. He was never in favor of the incarnation through the Virgin Mary. He was always opposed to that. So, Catholics can go pretty bad. Some pretty bad ex-Catholics in history. Adolf Hitler was an ex-Catholic, for example. Mussolini was a baptized Catholic at least. But we don't have a theological reason where we would somehow in our own minds condone that. Okay. And still think we might be, in accord with something in heaven, in the heavenly realms. Okay. Okay, Max, you're welcome. I'm going to look at some of the comments in chat here. The bystanders' heads only turned towards Charlie, so I see it was a localized explosion. There are some bystanders that looked to the left and the right. The guy who shut down said he looked left and right. He looked to the left. A lot of people look to the left. Now the sound coming out of the left and the crack bank analysis that puts that shrub on that little balcony on the left of Charlie, on the right side of Charlie, actually. It could be the echo from a supersonic shot from the low C roof. That's possible because I have heard echoes, and when you hear echoes in a valley of stone, that's good echo resonance. The sound can come from a very different direction. Just go on YouTube and look at people yodeling in the Swiss Alps and where it appears the sound is coming from. Make sure you get a stereo version of it so you can experience it yourself. So, unidentified. You have a very higher caliber and should be consuming anything. I have unidentified. I only have the information I've seen on YouTube. Okay, so because I've only been looking at this on YouTube. So see how far I've gotten already on YouTube, and I'm not tied down to the narratives that are fed. I look at the evidence. For example, Candace Owens, in her investigation about Jewish donors to TPUSA, might have had some motive to remove Charlie. I mean, she published evidence that Charlie felt he was going to be killed by these people. Okay, so that's pretty damning evidence. But the fact that Charlie felt that someone was going to kill him doesn't mean they're the ones that killed him, okay? That's pretty substantial evidence, and she could be sued if she made that all up. So I find that highly credible. And but what can I do with that information? Does that help me know who the shooter is, or how Charlie died, or who was behind changing everyone in the court states and all these institutions? No, it doesn't. Okay, so it gives me. Are those billionaires capable of organizing this? Yes. A billionaire, if he wants to spend his money, can easily. I mean, you can hire an assassin anywhere in the world for a very small amount of money. You can bribe enough people to make changes. If you're a big donor to Kash Patel, you could say, let's get rid of those liberals in Utah. And you could have told them in July to do that, because, you might get a risk assessment and say, our risk assessment shows it's highly likely that Charlie Kirk will turn against the Zionist agenda later in this year from our psychological profile of him. And this is what our psychological profiling department in Mossad found. And therefore, we're letting you know this so that you take preparations to see that doesn't hurt our influence in TP USA later in the year. Highly intelligent people think ahead. Most of us don't think ahead. We just live for the moment, and maybe we'll think about the past and repent of our sins, but we're not planning crimes way in the ahead. We're not thinking way in ahead of how to control the world because we're not psychopaths. Okay, we're not megalomaniacs. But if a person has billions of dollars, they might think that way. Okay, especially if they're ambitious people that made their money that way. Excuse me a moment. Okay, so I think I've talked about everything. Oh, yeah. So the other things that show that whoever did this was a professional, and when I say that the person who did the shooting is a professional, is in my uneducated opinion, I'd see that to be successful as this person was, they had to have a lot of information that one person couldn't possibly know. So, if the person they're accusing to have committed this murder, Tyler Robinson, was known to have been in the ROTC or ex-Special Forces USA, then I'd say more likely maybe it was a single shooter. But since he wasn't none of those things, as far as we know, how did he commit the perfect crime? Because Kash Patel claims that in 33 hours we found him. No, you didn't find him. The head of his Boy Scout group who knew him and saw those photos helped him turn himself in. So hundreds of agents were trying to look for this guy and they couldn't find him. To me, that already argues that there's a conspiracy, okay? Because that means this guy's expertise exceeded that of 400 FBI agents. What? No, he's intelligent, but he's not that intelligent. I didn't get a 4.0 in high school, but I got a near 4.0, and I got the Rensselaer Medal for the highest academic achievement in high school in science and mathematics. I graduated from Satellite High and high school in Florida, which is near Cape Canaveral. So I don't think I'm as intelligent as Tyler Robinson, but I'm pretty darn close. And I can tell you, just because you're intelligent doesn't mean you know how to do everything. Like when he jumps off that corner of that roof, like someone who has absolutely done this many times and has absolutely no fear of jumping off 16-foot roofs, knowing how to fall without getting injured, and in a split moment decides to run in a way where he's going to have to jump off the roof. Whoever's running on that roof is trained. He's absolutely trained. There's, we have heard nothing about the life of Tyler Robinson so far to know that he liked jumping off roofs and he's doing that since he was 12. No, if I had heard that in the first week, I'd say, okay. But, people don't do that. Where would you even get the opportunity to jump off 16-foot roofs and train on that? Well, you would do it in a terrorist camp or in a military training camp. And, so, but that's professional preparation, because he could have easily walked off that roof down to the parking lot and no one would have seen him with that gun. Why does he have to jump off the roof and run across the street like that? That's just like, now that I know how easy it is to get off the roof and get on the roof, it's like added theatrics. It's almost as if it was done so that we would think it was Tyler Robinson. It's almost. The problem is you don't see a gun there. And there are people who say they see something like a gun, and there's debates about that. It doesn't seem we're showing the actual footage from the camera, and maybe we are showing the actual footage of the camera. Maybe the camera couldn't capture that. Who's to say? But I think there's a reasonable doubt that he's not carrying a gun, and that gun found in the woods. I think there's whatever it is. They haven't shown us that picture either, and until we see that picture, we don't know how to interpret that video we see. So that's problematic. So. But whoever did do it wasn't caught. on the streets with the rifle that did it, you know. So as soon as they said they found the rifle in the woods, I'd say, if you don't find that crime weapon at the scene, there is doubt that what you find is the crime weapon. That's the first forensic principle. You now have to prove that that rifle was at the scene. And if they can't tie that bullet fragment back to that rifle, reasonable doubt, you know, because he could have been shot by a drone. How do you know? Maybe he was just told to go on that roof and fire a supersonic round over to the highway into the lake. Maybe that's all he was told to do. We see Kozak, the guy who was speaking to Charlie, who's part of this Bleep America tour run by Destiny to follow Charlie around and harass him. We see what appears to be him practicing his reaction at the time of the shooting, before the shooting take place. So it's highly likely that, but yet he seems honestly shocked when he does move his hands to his head. It seems that he might have been asked to play a role without realizing there would be an assassination. You know, maybe he was said that someone's going to hit him with, you know, a dart gun or just shoot him in the ear or something little like that and actually assassinate him. And that's highly possible for the guy on the roof too, that he was just told to do these things as a spotter. One theory is a spotter. Baron Coleman thinks he was a spotter, and or someone firing a round over into the lake that it wouldn't actually hit Charlie, so that they have a sound of a gunfire, just to cause mayhem. So just because someone is actually an actor in the events that enable it or decorate it or cause it to be inexplicable or an object of terror, political terror, doesn't mean that they knew they were an actor in it, or that they knew they were participating in a murder before the fact. Okay, doesn't mean that. We shouldn't assume that. So as I say, I haven't seen any evidence that convinces me that was Tyler Robinson on that roof. There was, you know, it looks like a man, but you know, it could be Tyler. It could be Twigs. It could be anyone. You know, because as I said, there was 5 people dressed in the colors of Tyler Robinson, the Dairy Queen, on campus that day. You see that in Life is Drawing's video. You look at it. I have a post on that from Rome where I actually tell you the timestamp, so you'll see the 5 people. So his exfil was perfect, and there's no way that a Tyler Robinson could have planned a perfect exfil like that. There's just no way, in my opinion, no way. He would have had to have someone doing live surveillance. He would have had to have someone do surveillance beforehand. You look at how many experts looking at mere Google Maps who haven't been to the campus have widely divergent views about what you could see from what building. So those who claim, and it has been said, that the police have evidence that Tyler Robinson did all these kinds of searches on Google Earth, that doesn't mean he was planning a murder. And that doesn't mean that that information was sufficient for him to determine where to sit. He had to go there. He had to figure it out. He had to have someone show it. And if someone is filming all the roofs and he's watching that live feed on his phone, then he can easily, in a matter of a few minutes, find the exact spot, because he's seeing it from different angles by someone from a different location. And he knows how to approach it without not appearing it on that screen. And I'm not saying that Adam Bartholomew with Life is Driving knew or had the intention of filming roofs for that purpose. He might have been told just film roofs, and that he didn't know he was being involved in something bigger. And I know he's going to get mad at me for saying this, but you know, I don't think it's credible that anyone who knows how to use the camera would have framed an hour-long video the way you did, Adam Bartholomew. And I just don't think it's credible. I think the criticism's up because I've used cameras. And I remember when I was young, I had a camera. I took it to visit my great Uncle Nico in Verona, and I took a picture of him and his wife, and I sent it to him. And he wrote me back years later. He says, you know, you took a picture like a professional with the shadow and everything. I mounted that image in my home with me and my wife, and I cherish it because it was just absolutely perfect. So I know I have some talent on how to frame a picture, even though I have no formal training in photography. And I totally agree with Baron Coleman's criticism of the way that Life is Driving framed his entire video. And I don't know how he can afford such an expensive setup, a professional camera rig and everything, and link and everything in his backpack, and yet not know the slightest thing about how do you frame a video. You know, don't know how. I don't know it at all. And how 115 media organizations can contact you and get your video. I don't know that at all. But I do know that there appears to, you read my article on the 5 lookalikes on the campus, and I make some comments about some left-wing organizations that were very interested in Life is Drowning's video. Okay. So that pretty much, I encourage you to watch all the YouTubers that keep talking about this. There's a lot of criticism that people are doing this only for likes or shares. You notice on my video, I'm not asking you for any money. I don't have any promoter contract with YouTube. They hate me. I don't like them. So if you saw ads during this, I don't get any of that revenue. I'm not doing this for clicks or likes. I'm doing this because I want people to learn to think. Because I talk about a lot of problems in the Catholic Church, and the problem we have in the Catholic Church is Catholics don't think. Catholics think that because they believe in Jesus Christ, they shouldn't question the criminal behavior of clergy or religious. That's just totally wrong. And I'm trying to create a whole new mindset in the Catholic-speaking world to get them to think about that. Because just because a person is a priest or religious doesn't mean he can't be a criminal, okay? And the level of criminality is just unbelievable because we don't have enough Catholics to attend to that. So I hope you enjoyed this. It's turned out to be a two-hour indirect, and I sacrificed something for you because I was making beef stew and it just burnt on the stove when you saw me run away. So I'll eat whatever remains of the ashes. But I think it was important for me to say what was to be said. Oh, the microphone tampering theory. You know, as I said, the air under that shirt, until someone gets that same shirt with the same fabric and puts it on a human being and starts squirting air at it at high velocity, we don't know how that shirt reacts. So it's hard to determine whether it's, could be exploding mic. Yeah, that technology exists, but it doesn't leave a shirt. So you would expect that it would leave a shirt, okay? Because that shirt is moving violently in a very brief time. So it takes tremendous force of some force to move it. And you would expect the thing to fly off. I think it eventually does fly off. So I think it's good that someone talks about the exploding mic, the one that's on his lapel, or the mic he's holding in his hand that's sitting in front of him, because where did that projectile come from? Martinson, who's a forensic pathologist, or I mean, he's not a forensic pathologist, but he has medical training. He says that bullet appears to have come in at a 20-degree angle, not a 9. Therefore, it's not the guy on the roof. That's a really compelling argument, and we should not exclude any of those kind of opinions. That's why I really personally side more to a drone in the trees or on the roof, like Baron Coleman says, and he's a defense attorney. Because of the angle, just because of the angle, There's already the problems of the bullet not penetrating and yet causing so much cavitation. But the angle is mere geometry. And, you don't have dancing bullets. You have geometry, and geometry is the simplest solution. And that points to the trees. It does not point to the low-C roof. And, okay. So, yeah, boy, black. Adrenaline in youth was on his side. So sometimes you do things you wouldn't expect. But I can tell you that a highly intelligent person is inclined more to be afraid because he can see in advance risks. And so for a highly intelligent person, if that was Tyler to jump off that roof when let's say he's never jumped off a 16-foot roof, I'm saying this guy is like a John Wick. And this is what I don't like about the whole narrative of the Kirk assassination. We're expected to believe that Charlie Kirk was Superman and that Tyler Robinson was a John Wick. And life is not like that. Is it possible that once in 1,000 years, something like that? Yeah, it could be that Tyler Robinson is the perfect homemade, self-made assassin. That's highly possible, I mean, but I don't think it's probable. If he grew up I mean, if his father was a paid assassin that worked for the Sicilian mafia, and his grandfather was too, and they trained him from youth to be an assassin, John Wick type, and he was like the national champion in the ninja challenge, things like that. Okay, but I haven't yet heard anything about Tyler Robinson that would include me. That not only was highly intelligent, that he was athletically superior. Okay. He doesn't look like me. He even went to the gym. Okay. So I ask you to like and share this video. I should have said that at the beginning, but I didn't. But my channel doesn't have many viewers, and I'd like to influence Catholics more. And so you can help me if you do a like and share, and or a subscribe if you want to hear future things. I hope this case doesn't go 3 years. I'm going to hope the judge does what I said during this video, that he declares a mistrial. If that charge, if manslaughter is not, if aggravated murder is not removed from it, he calls a mistrial at the end of this month, because this case is just so messed up. So there's so much evidence that's been tampered with already. There is by people at all different levels that. A justice system shouldn't try someone for a capital crime in conditions like this. It would be an egregious failure of justice. And if his legal team doesn't fight that, then he's a patsy and they're framing. And then maybe it's like Baron Coleman says, he's being framed because they found something on his devices that would convict him of something worse. And they're going to do like some kind of plea negotiation and give him a life sentence rather than death. Thank you very much. God bless, and see you next time.